Throughout history, there have been reports of chilling encounters with black dogs. Monstrous, bright-eyed, and skulking, these paranormal dogs have long been associated with evil, often sighted haunting lonely byways and moonlit graveyards. In pre-Christian times, there was Cerberus, the hound of Hades, who guarded the gateway to the Greek Underworld. In more modern times, they are thought of as hellhounds, the devil's beasts. As such, in their darkest incarnations, these creatures are considered to be omens of ill fortune and, in the worst case, death. The year was 1577, and the residents of Bungay, a market town located in the English county of Suffolk, were making their way to church. It should have been a Sunday morning like any other. However, the events that unfolded that day were so great and terrible that they left a black stain on the history of the town, and indeed much of the surrounding area. For on Sunday the 4th of August 1577, it is said that a hellhound manifested in the midst of an unusually violent storm. According to a pamphlet published that same year, between 9 and 10 o'clock that morning, a terrible rain began to fall on the town. The water fell with a wonderful force, and was followed by fearful flashes of lightning and thunder, the like whereof hath been seldom seen. Huddled together in the church, parishioners struggled to remain calm. All around them, the building quaked. Then, in the middle of it all, flashes of fire and a dog of a black colour appeared. Detailing the incident in the pamphlet published shortly afterwards, the clergyman Abraham Fleming described how the creature may have been the devil in such a likeness, for the dog raced through the church in amongst the town people with great swiftness and incredible haste. Passing between two people who were kneeling in prayer, the black hound is said to have wrung the necks of them both, tearing their heads clean backward, insomuch that even at a moment where they kneeled, they strangely died. In the violence of the storm, the creature continued to wreak havoc, attacking others and even leaving physical marks upon the building, with claw marks being left on both the stones of the church and its door. Fleming also described how many objects and furniture inside the church were destroyed as the black dog rushed about the building. As strange as this incident may have been by itself, the hellish events of that day were far from concluded. In his pamphlet, Fleming also included reports from Blythburgh, a village only a few miles from Bungay. It is said that they too suffered a visit from the same black dog. With a clap of thunder, the doors to the church crashed open, and the beast rushed inside. There it slew 2 men and a lad, and burned the hand of another person. In concluding his pamphlet, Fleming wrote that despite the absurdity of the tale, these things are reported to be true by the mouths of them that were eyewitnesses. And certainly stories of the black dog did not disappear. Across the centuries, the legend of the hellhound continued, with the horrifying creature coming to be known as Black Shuck or Old Shuck, Shuck coming from the Anglo-Saxon word for devil or fiend. Writing in 1850, some 300 years after the original incident, Reverend E.S. Taylor described how many people, not just in Suffolk but in neighbouring East Norfolk and even Cambridgeshire, described having seen a black shaggy dog with fiery eyes and of immense size. Spotted roaming the roads, countryside and coastline, Black Shuck was also said to visit churchyards at midnight. Later, in 1961, when the BBC did a report on the phenomenon, a local man called Tom Starling described how, some 30 years earlier, he had an encounter with Old Shuck. The moon was at its fullest, and he was pushing his bike along a road when he heard the rattling of chains. Starling at first thought the sound was merely a horse coming off the marshes. When it came nearer and nearer, he decided to stop and allow it to pass. However, it was no horse. In the light of the moon, Starling observed a great big black shaggy dog pass in front of him. Not only did it walk by him, it continued to move towards a gate opposite. The gate was closed, but the creature still somehow walked through it. When he relayed his experience to others in the area, they were not surprised. Old Shuck had been seen many a time, and if reports are to be believed, would continue to be seen right up until the present day. Today, encounters with a large, seemingly supernatural black dog are reported regularly all across East Anglia. One can even visit the church in Blythburgh and see the scorch-like claw marks supposedly left on the door by the Hellhound in 1577. Perhaps most surprising, however, is a story from 2014 and the discovery of a huge skeleton at Leiston Abbey in Suffolk. The bones belong to a hound weighing some 200 pounds. On its hind legs, the massive creature would have stood 7 feet tall. The abbey where the bones were uncovered lies a mere 10 miles from Blythburgh and might just suggest the reports from that terrible Sunday all those years ago were indeed rooted in reality. Black Shuck may very well have existed, and indeed may not roam the countryside alone, with his hellish descendants still seen on dark nights by those brave enough to go out and look for them. During the late 19th century, the sugar business in Argentina was flourishing. Sugar refineries became a highly lucrative trade and spread most especially in the northernmost parts of the country. However, to those who worked in the mills, it was believed there was something more sinister at work than capitalism. Underneath the gilded success of the mills, they believed that the devil himself was at work. At night, all the mills were said to be patrolled by large black hellhounds, known as familiars. They were believed to be sent by the devil himself, so as to enforce a contract made by the owners of the mills. The contract was simple. The owner would thrive at the expense of his workers. A given number of workers each year needed to be delivered to the King of Hell as the refinery owner's due for his continued success. Then, at the end of the owner's life, the black dog of Satan would come for him and tear him to shreds. Thus, the final payment would be met. Afterwards, the dog would disappear into the night. One of the most prominently attested places to have had a familiar in residence was the refinery in Santa Ana. It was said that the familiar would accompany the mill owner along with a pack of 40 to 50 normal dogs. According to reports from the time, he seemed unashamed of his devilish association, and indeed seemed to have used his reputation to instill fear into his workers. On the 26th and 27th of December, employees were terrified to come and collect their paycheck, for it was said that that was the owner's payday, the day when a soul needed to be delivered by the Hellhound to his diabolical master. Indeed, this pact seemed to have paid such good dividend to the owner that the Santa Ana sugar refinery was considered to be the most productive in the country in 1895. Its success was so great that a railway line was built to the mill so as to more efficiently transport its goods. On the day the railway line was inaugurated, several people are said to have witnessed the owner's familiar block the train in its path in an act that seemed to demonstrate the creature's supernatural authority. The Santa Ana refinery was far from alone in being home to tales of the familiar. Another infamous residence of the Hellhound was claimed to be the Bella Vista refinery. One night in the 1930s, a worker at the mill is said to have witnessed the hound and described it as a black mass as big as a calf with burning eyes. Ever since, from generation to generation, in the northern regions of Argentina, tales of the familiar have been passed on and still persist, even until this day. In Welsh mythology, stories of hellhounds stretch far back to antiquity. Celtic tradition swarms with innumerable tales of a dog of darkness, a canine creature with fiery eyes that howls at night, known as the Gwythky. According to myth, Aaron, king of Annwn, an otherworldly realm, is said to keep a pack of these black hellhounds at his disposal. His hounds are said to come in the colder months of the year, so as to hunt down wrongdoers and drag them to his realm. Some associations have been made between this legend and historic sightings of the Wild Hunt, whereby people attest to witnessing phantom armies, complete with spectral hounds, appearing in the sky. Yet, not all Gwythky belong to Aaron. There are many more that are said to exist outside of his control. Often, eyewitness testimonies connect these otherworldly animals to lonely roads at night. It is said that the dog's fiery gaze has the power to paralyze its victims. In the Vale of Glamorgan, there are several tales of encounters with such hounds. In the 19th century, an English visitor to the area alleged to have become paralyzed upon hearing its howl from a distance, so much so that his legs did not work and he had to be assisted home. In another report, a farmer named Jenkin claimed to have seen a Gwythky at night when he was returning home on a mare. His horse was so frightened by the hellish dog that it threw him off into the mud. Due to the Welsh hellhound's vicious reputation, it is speculated that there have been many more unknown stories with less fortunate endings. A supernatural stalker, many fear the Gwythky as an unstoppable hunter which trails its victims until it is close enough to attack and tear them to shreds. To this very day, sightings of the hellhound persist across Wales. Mark Rees, a prominent Welsh author and folklorist, has documented a more recent encounter, which is said to have occurred to a night security guard at the Corran Resort, located on the south coast of Carmarthenshire. According to the security guard, the hotel always turns unnaturally cold between 3 and 4 in the morning, regardless of the time of year. During one of the nights he worked at the resort, he was taking a break around this time in room 5 of the hotel. He was watching a film and he started to doze off when, all of a sudden, he became completely paralyzed. According to his testimony, nothing he did could make him move. He was trapped within his body. It was then that he saw a black thing in the room. It looked like a huge black Alsatian dog. The security guard was completely terrified, but still was unable to move. The only thing he could do was stare at the black dog as it bared its teeth at him before disappearing. Other employees of the resort have also reported encountering the hellhound. One woman even alleged to have run away from the hotel as fast as she was able after seeing the beast run across the bar one night. Curiously, the security guard whom Rees interviewed to document this encounter had never heard of the Gwythky before, and was shocked to find out that there were other cases like his in history. For him, there was no doubt as to what he had seen. And so, in this case, there may be more truth in the legends of the hellhounds of Wales than it first seems. The hellhound is a creature that has a strong presence in Latin American culture. Around the hound's neck, it is said to wear a large chain, something which ominously announces its presence to its soon-to-be victims. Thus, the hound is called the Cadejo, an evolution of the Spanish word for chain. That said, in Central and South America, the association between dogs and death has pre-Columbian roots. It was believed by Mesoamerican cultures that a great big black dog was responsible for ferrying people to the afterlife, which is why many tombs of these cultures are inscribed with pictures of dogs. It was thought to be impossible to pass to the next world without canine assistance. Even to this day, the modern Maya of Guatemala believe that if one treats dogs badly in life, then the black dog will not assist them when they die. Even though the black dog traditionally appears as a benevolent psychopomp responsible for guiding the dead, the canine's reputation has been transformed throughout the centuries after interactions with Western belief. Drawing on the hellish nature of mythical dogs like Cerberus and those associated with Satan himself, the black dog gained a devilish persona. As such, the black Cadejo is a creature that inspires terror. One such terror-inducing encounter occurred in the Mexican village of Abadiano in 1949. The story was retold in 2006 in La Estrella, a Spanish-language Texan newspaper, by the journalist Margarita Hernandez. The article detailed the story of Hernandez's father, who was walking home one night after having attended a vigil. He had taken that same path many times before and knew the area well. As he walked, he noticed a vehicle coming his way, and, worried that it might be soldiers and that they might confiscate his gun, he jumped over a fence to hide from them. Once the vehicle had passed, he went back onto the road. Yet, there he noticed a small black dog. Expecting to see its owner nearby, he looked around to see if he could spot them. He could not. Once his attention returned to the dog, he is said to have had the fright of his life. The creature was growing right before his eyes. Horrified, he pulled out his pistol and pointed at the ever larger beast. He fired his weapon. It is said that nothing happened. The bullet merely fell to the floor before him. By this time, the black Cadejo had grown to the size of a small horse and seemed ready to strike. The man fired again with the same result. The hellish canine, so it seemed, was bulletproof. Fearing for his life, he is claimed to have instinctively called out, "Hail Mary, most pure," at which the dog disappeared. After this, he ran as fast as he could. All the dogs in the village began to howl as he did, terrifying him to go faster. Once he got through the door of his house, he reportedly fainted. And so, that night at least, the Cadejo was unable to claim his victim. The hanging hills of south-central Connecticut are a range of mountainous cliffs and ridges. Overlooking the city of Meridian, the hills are popular amongst hikers, cyclists, and rock climbers. They are also, if local folklore is to be believed, home to a rare creature, a supernatural hound known as the Black Dog of the Hanging Hills. Stories proclaiming the beast's existence have circulated in oral tradition for decades. It is said that the otherworldly creature is a herald of fortune. If you meet the black dog once, it shall be for joy. If twice, it shall be for sorrow, and the third time shall bring death. One of the earliest written accounts of the black dog can be found in the Connecticut Quarterly, an illustrated magazine that was active from 1895 to 1908. In the magazine's second volume of 1898, an article by the geologist W.H.C. Pynchon described an encounter that had taken place some 7 years earlier, on the 6th of February 1891. According to Pynchon, the encounter was deadly, resulting in the death of his friend Herbert Marshall, another geologist with whom Pynchon was working. The men were conducting geological research in the Hanging Hills when they saw a black dog. This was not, however, a novel sight for either man. Years before, when Pynchon had been a student studying rocks in a valley close to West Peak in the hills, what he described as the same dog had trotted along the road, watching him as he worked. Pynchon wrote that he seemed friendly and kept him company, even following him in his wagon all the way up to West Peak and later down into Southington, where Pynchon stopped for dinner. Certainly, the geologist wrote, that dog was a philosopher, for he was inquisitive, watchful, and determined to follow him everywhere. The creature was light of foot, and not once did Pynchon hear him bark. As the day drew to an end, they, the dog, Pynchon and his horse, passed along the same route they had taken earlier, towards the spot where the geologist had first encountered the canine. As the last light of the setting sun was just touching the highest rocks, the dog stopped, looked back at Pynchon for a moment, and then vanished into the woods. Sad to have lost his companion, the geologist whistled and called for the black dog, but it seemed as though it had disappeared entirely. As for Marshall, he had seen the dog twice before. 1891 was, therefore, his third encounter. It was also his last. That day, the weather had been terrible, and the man battled to trudge through the snow near West Peak. Marshall was in the lead, and Pynchon recalled how he had stopped and wordlessly pointed to the top of the cliff. There, high on the rocks above the geologists, stood a black dog. It was like the one Pynchon had encountered previously. By this time, however, Pynchon, through his discussion with Marshall the previous evening, had learned of the legend of the black dog and was therefore unsettled to see him. According to his article, the hound looked jet black against the snow. As he and Marshall watched, the creature raised his head, and the men saw his breath rise steaming from his jaws, but no sound came through the biting air. The black dog looked back at the geologists, then bounded away. Marshall was terrified. Although he had said he did not believe in the stories, in that moment he was converted. Turning to Pynchon, he supposedly said, "I did not believe it before, I believe it now, and it is the third time." At that very moment, even as he spoke, the fragment of rock on which he stood slipped. There was a cry, and Pynchon found himself alone. Marshall had plunged to his death. Later, when Marshall's body was recovered, those who found him claimed that a black dog had been watching over him. As they approached, the creature is said to have fled back into the snowy shadows from which it had come. As friendly as the hound may have first appeared, it, so it turned out, was a terrible omen of death. Far from being a 19th century quirk, the legend of the black dog of the Hanging Hills has persisted. Indeed, it is still regularly reported by visitors to the hills, with at least 6 deaths having been blamed on third meetings with the black dog. Only last year, a visitor to the Hanging Hills shared an encounter they had in the spring of 2014. Writing on Reddit, they explained how they and their wife regularly hike the range, taking a trail up to Castle Craig, a stone tower that overlooks the cliffs and the city below. On that particular trip, they claim to have seen something peculiar, a small figure on the side of the road leading up to Castle Craig between some shrubbery. Blurry, but most certainly there, the figure resembled a black dog with floppy ears and a hot dog tail. According to the hiker, it was much like the one illustrated in Pynchon's 1898 article. The ethereal dog-like figure, so the poster writes, crossed the road, dawdling with its nose to the ground. It did not stop to look at the couple, and they, having heard the local legend, were too shocked to move. Similar is an encounter reported by Michael Anastasio, a Meridian native and former US Marine. In 2004, he was taking photographs at Castle Craig when he noticed a dog standing by the tower. There were no other people around besides Anastasio and his brother, no obvious owner for the dog. It also supposedly had no collar or tags. In short, it had seemingly appeared from nowhere. Strangest of all, however, was the uncanny resemblance that the creature bore to the black dog in Pynchon's article. Anastasio was able to photograph the dog, and, whilst it appears to resemble an earthly animal, the prevalence of the legend is difficult to ignore. Fortunately for Anastasio and his brother, this was their first, and hopefully last, encounter with the black dog of the Hanging Hills. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more of the paranormal. Equally, you can sign up to my email newsletter on paranormalscholar.com to ensure you never miss an upload. And if you cannot wait until my next video, why not watch the one suggested on screen now? Until next time.